Hey, thanks for jumping back on the videos. We're pretty excited. This is day 2 in our 6-week video adventure. Going through this book that we're really excited about, John and Julie Gottmans' book, The 7-Day Love Prescription. This little book that we talked about in the last video of how significant it's been to us to pick up some tips and tricks for our relationship as well as for our work. As a reminder, I'm a California licensed marriage and family therapist. My name is Mark Howerton, by the way.
And I'm Anna Howerton, a divorce coach.
Yeah, so we love talking about relationships, finding ways that we can help curate depth and intimacy with folks, and newsflash, with each other. So it's kind of a fun way to continue to grow and invest in our growth, as well as be supportive of the people we work with. So excited about this book. Today we're doing day 2 in the Gottman book, and day 2 in the 7-Day Love Prescription is
Ask a big question.
Ask a big question. So all about how do we begin to curate a curiosity of asking open-ended questions to continue to get to know one another well into the relationship.
Yeah, maybe even add another C, curate a consistent curiosity. So one of the things they talk about in the paragraph or the chapter here on asking a big question is how do you stay curious over decades, month after month, year after year. Like, how do you get in a habit of asking your partner questions to really know them and want to know them and staying curious about who they are? Because if your goal, and I think most people's goal is to stay together for many, many years, you've got to be in a habit of staying curious about your partner, because hopefully it's very rare that somebody would stay the exact same person they were at 24 as they are at 54. And so how do you curate consistent curiosity about your partner?
Yeah, that's great. And the Gottmans obviously are saying we need to proactively, daily ask questions of one another so that we can continue to stay connected and curious and get to know each other deeply. And I love that point, to the idea of, like, when you're first starting a dating relationship, when you first meet somebody, you're so curious, where are you from? What do you do? What do you like? What are your hopes? What are your goals? What are your passions? Like, what really, gets you going? And you're also excited about talking about those things, about revealing yourself and sharing those inner desires and hopes and excitements and even vulnerabilities and insecurities. So early in a relationship, the curation of intimacy is this deep inquiry. And that's kind of kind of curates and creates this sense of intimate exposure and vulnerability. And it's a very exciting, loving chapter of a relationship. And it's really great.
And the questions almost happen, they happen effortlessly when you're dating, because it is this brand new landscape or territory that you're getting to know this person, their inner world, their history, where they've been, where they want to go, their hopes and dreams. And unfortunately, so many couples, once the sort of effortless period of questions have been asked and run through and exhausted, so many couples fall into a pattern of like, okay, cool. Like, I know this person. Like, if I've created a book now of who they are, their past, their family relationships, where they're going, what they want to do, what they're good at, what they're not good at, hopes, dreams, fears. Okay, I've got this book now. I'm just going to take it and like put it on the shelf. And now we're just going to do life together and, ask like who's doing soccer carpool today and who's going to pick up butter at the grocery store or things like that. And couples ask so many ticky-tacky, like logistical questions. But once that initial dating period's over, the romancing, the wooing period, it is really hard for couples to stay in a motion of asking questions that would be similar to when you first started dating, of like, who are you? Like, what's going on with you? How are you different today than you were 5 years ago when we first started dating? And they talk about that, as you stay in a relationship for many years, the same questions will have different answers year over year, like life goals shift, bucket lists evolve, like what people think they want. Like, all of us, I hope, are on a path of growth and evolving to be a new person, continuously throughout life. And so one of the key things that they call out for relationships to be healthy and alive and thriving is for both partners to really want to be endlessly curious about the other person.
Yeah, it's so great. Yeah, I love that. And the irony is, in this sort of arc of relationship, early in a relationship, all that natural inquiry you're talking about, this so just effortless, it begins to fade, like you said, with regards to the fundamental needs of life. But then ironically, then when couples come into therapy in exhaustion, in irritation, in, you know, kind of emptiness or loneliness in a relationship, they might even say things like I've changed so much, you know, my spouse doesn't even know me. I feel like I don't even know who they are. I don't even know who I'm sleeping next to. Even though, again, nothing happened fundamentally to say, stop asking questions, stop getting curious. But nonetheless, we kind of, you know, can unfortunately fall into that state of lack of inquiry, which means lack of intimacy. So that proactive agreement that we're going to be curious about one another is really, really very important. You know, again, and I also think this ties to the individual work that I love doing with clients, is know yourself. Also, are you aware of how you're changing?
Right.
And, you know, to think through, you know, if a couple's been together for a long time, who we were at, you know, 23, 24, 25, 26, 28 when we got together compared to now midlife, there's a ton of fundamental ways that we're different. There are just so many ways that we change subtly, you know, politically, emotionally, your financial worldview, your spiritual worldview. These things can have should have a natural evolution in who we are as human beings over the course of our lifetime. And to somehow think that our spouse intuitively knows those things is a misconception. And so to invite your spouse in or to inquire about your spouse's evolution is a great way to curate intimacy for the long haul.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things they say that is so beautiful in the chapter is that any relationship is a process of meeting each other again and again and again over the years. And we have a really fun, tight, concrete example of this in our own relationship where 3.5 years ago, when we started dating, you were almost exclusively a vegetarian. And now 3.5 years fast forward, you're a carnivore.
Yeah.
And so if I, you know, had thought, oh my gosh, I'm, you know, in partnership with, and now I'm going to marry a vegetarian, like I would be, you know, I'd be in for a rude surprise if I hadn't, you know, really been open to Mark changing and also open to being with a partner who was going to evolve and have a different perspective today than he did 3.5 years ago, and want to take a left turn or be someone different or be somewhere new, or, you know, be someone new than he was in a different way when we first started dating. And so I think that is where you get hung up on, if as people change, I mean, this is very cliche, but it's cliche for a reason, people grow in different directions. So if you grow, which is how marriages and relationships fall apart, if people grow in different directions and they're not staying together in it and checking in and also aligned with the growth, then it will inevitably fall apart. So you have to find this space and a container in a relationship or marriage where you're curious about how they're growing, and that you allow the growth in different ways that, you know, can still allow for you to be connected.
Yeah. Although I think there's a very fascinating paradox with all this, because there's radical change, but there's also stability. So obviously in that early kind of, inquiry, intimacy building, courtship of the relationship, you do get to know some fundamental values of the other person. And there are some ways you're like, I know you, I now know you. And we are together because we have many shared values, dreams, hopes, traits that work well together in a complementary way. And so in some ways, we do know each other so well. This is why it's paradoxical. In some ways, like you could say like, oh yeah, I know Mark, he likes this, he doesn't like that. And you'd be right a lot of the time, and probably right for the rest of my life. A significant percentage of the time you'd be right. But then there's those instances like you just brought up where for whatever reason, personal health, new information, experimentation, I've had a radical shift in, just kind of a basic way that I live my life that you'd say, I wouldn't have guessed that. So you still would probably be accurate if you said, here's who Mark is, and laid out some aspects of my personality. But if you get solidified in that and narrow in that, and you're not open to thinking, but wait, my partner also might change, then you're going to lose the parts that do evolve. So it's appreciation for who we know the person to be, and a wondering or a curiosity if there's an evolution in who they're becoming.
Right. Yeah. And they talk about in this chapter 2 on the day 2, ask a big question. If you consistently approach your partner with curiosity, you'll never run out of new facts to discover. And I think oftentimes people don't anticipate that as they get married to someone they feel like they do know quite well, that they're going to have blind spots in their knowledge of that person's inner world, their partner's inner world. And that is this, dance that even Esther Perel talks about some, is like, we want intimacy, safety, and to like know this person so deeply, but then we also want mystery and newness. And the reality is, like, you can find both in a partnership, because an ideal state is two people who are together in a relationship or a marriage that are both wanting to grow and change and evolve. But part of the work in staying connected is checking in with each other on, how are you changing? And is there a part of your inner world that I don't know about, that I haven't asked about? And it is one of the most beautiful ways to make someone feel loved, is to ask questions. And so I actually heard Julie Gottman talking about this on a podcast, maybe even before this book came out or as it was coming out, where they titled this one Day 2, Ask a Big Question, but they also talk about it and framing it as ask expansive questions. So ask questions that are not yes or no, because that's when you're really trying to dial in and understand someone and like pull at a thread and go deeper with someone. So she gave the example, which you think would just be a very basic question, like, what's your favorite color? And if somebody says red, you say, okay, well, what do you like about red? Like, how does it make you feel? What does it make you think about? Like almost any question you can say, tell me more. Or how did you think about that? Or why? There's so many other questions that we can, piggyback on an initial question to make an expansive question, or as they say, a big question, so that it becomes this exercise in really, A, making your partner feel loved, because you're saying, you're important to me, you matter, I want to know about you. And then B, it just creates this connection, because then you do know more about them or what's going on in their inner world, where you might otherwise have a blind spot. And so I think I maybe must have heard that on a podcast, right as we started dating, because I said to you, the Gottmans talk a lot about how important it is to ask expansive questions. And I talked with my two girlfriends who I walk early in the morning with about this as well, and said, this is a really key thing, I think, to relationships, is asking expansive questions, staying curious about your partner, like never thinking you fully know them. And I said it to you, and then ahead of maybe your second or third trip out east to see me, you ordered some cards from Amazon that were just like dating question cards or something. And the little Amazon message was like, hoping to have some expansive questions with you this weekend or something. And I told the girls out that I walk with, and they were like, swoon.
So dreamy. So dreamy.
But it was so sweet. It was so sweet, because A, it showed you were listening, and B, that you cared. And then now we have this stack of cards that are really fun of, questions that help us go deeper and know one another.
Yeah. Well, and with that being said, I think that's a fun story. I like that story. It's easier for some people than others. So some personality types are just more naturally inquisitive, and questioning, in relational ways comes easier, whether that person's more of an empath by personality type or whatever it might be. But some people just might be more natural in kind of that automatic, inquiry to get to know someone.
Who does it come easier to in our relationship?
It comes so much easier to you, babe. You do. And that's part of the reason I bought the cards. It's like, okay, cool. Like, other than what's your favorite color, what's your life goal, I'm like, this is great. This is giving me all sorts of tips and tricks for additional questions. But again, that's what I love about this book, is that they're identifying that as a skill. So we can increase our skill set. So the hope is I'm getting better at asking questions. I understand the importance of it. So I've been convinced that it matters, both in how it makes me feel when you ask me and what I learn about you when I ask you. So I'm convinced that it works, and I need to increase my natural skills at it. And so I'm increasing my habit and technique in asking those questions. And I use tools, both the card deck you're talking about. Also, the Gottmans have a free app called Question Deck. And so you can actually download from the App Store a free app that's just kind of open-ended questions like we're talking about. So if you do struggle like me, you're a bit of a blockhead sometimes, and asking, expanding questions, I can just open the app and say, hey, let's go through a handful of these questions. And because the goal is to get to know one another, it doesn't feel awkward or offensive that I'm using a resource, does it?
No. No. I was just thinking more about how I sometimes razz you, because I think for people who are not as naturally good about it, sometimes I'll ask him a question and then he'll respond. And then I'll ask him another question, and then he'll respond, and then I'll ask him. And like, I think for people who aren't as natural, maybe like catch yourself if your partner's asked like 2 or 3 questions in a row, like maybe they would like to be asked that exact same question in return. So
I've gotten better at it. I've increased my skill set.
You have gotten better. So sometimes, and I've also pulled back on asking the second or third question. I'll just sometimes ask one question, let you respond, and then I'm like, I'm gonna give him some time, see if he'll ask in response. And then, wait and see. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It goes real silent for a bit. And then he'll be like, oh, how did you sleep?
Yes. Just takes me a minute. It takes some of us a little longer than others. Yeah. Hey, one final thought I want to spend just 2 minutes on with this that I really liked in this chapter was using this kind of inquiry approach to unpack conflict. And one of the points they make is a lot of the times some of our biggest conflicts are rubbing up against deep core values, deep values. And again, this is something I see in my practice all the time, where like, why did I get so upset about that? Or why did that just really kind of set you off in a way that to me seemed outsized, like that seemed like an outsized response for me or from you. What's going on? And typically, and this is kind of across the board, when we have a spiked conflict, I'd say the majority of the time, it's because it felt like my value or something that deeply is intrinsic to me was encroached upon. And so once we cool down to say, hey, what was it about that really, hurt me or set me off, or it seemed like that really was a sensitive area. What's behind that took it to the next level beyond just the understandable conflict that it may have been. And a lot of times we might even for ourselves unpack a deeper sensitivity or a deeper value that's very, very important to us that we haven't had the ability to articulate until we kind of unpack a super high conflict. So I think they call that like hidden value through conflict or hidden dreams through conflict, and saying like there's a lot of gold there. And if we can say like, I want to connect with you, I don't like conflict with you, I want to learn from this experience. Can you help me understand to the best of your ability, to the best of my ability to understand why was that such a hot topic for us? That can really be a vulnerable and powerful, value-laden, intimate conversation.
Awesome. So day 2, ask a big question, ask expansive questions. Always be curious and stay curious about your partner. Don't feel like you ever fully know them. There's always something more to discover.
Right on. We'll see you guys next week. Have a great day. Thanks for coming.